He was South India's most influential Christian pastor until he was recently found lifeless on the side of a road. Now, police say it was a drunk driving accident, but those who know him don't believe that at all. They said right before his death, he was being targeted by powerful people who wanted him silent. And now, someone is trying to cover it up. So if you don't know who Pastor Praveen is, then you may not know why his death sparked so much outrage and why it looks so suspicious. Praveen started his career as a software engineer, eventually building a successful tech company. But after a life-changing encounter with Jesus, everything shifted. He left business behind to preach the gospel full-time, and he never looked back. He went on to become one of the most influential Christian leaders in southern India, known for planting churches in unreached areas, defending the faith through televised debates, and speaking out against injustice. Praveen also worked to dismantle the Devdasi system, a practice where young girls are forced into temple-based sexual exploitation under the guise of religious tradition. So he wasn't just a preacher, he was a reformer. His background in engineering also gave him a sharp analytical mind, something he brought into every theological debate and public defense of the gospel.
The debate or the event during which Pastor Praveen shot to popularity, became a superstar overnight, if I may say so, was in 2012. It spanned for 2 days in a mosque, at least in the Western Hemisphere, where freedom of speech and blasphemy laws are not so much the case. The freedom of speech is preserved. But to do that in India takes sheer guts. Like, you have to be absolutely bold and courageous to go into enemy territory and do that.
He quickly became one of India's leading Christian apologists, engaging Hindu and Muslim scholars in televised debates that reached thousands. But here's where things get messy. When you're that outspoken, you don't just make fans, you make enemies. And in his case, some powerful ones. Sharing the gospel in India isn't like how it is sharing the gospel out here in the West.
So would it be fair to say that there's like a sense of fear for Christians in India when it comes to proclaiming their faith?
Oh, absolutely. Anyone can go and report anyone for allegedly converting someone, which is very much equivalent to the blasphemy laws that we see in Pakistan. These draconian laws are put into effect primarily because of the Christian presence and the Christian effort in sharing the gospel. And the rest of India knows that this is not something that we are making up. This is not a fear that we are mongering out of nowhere. This is ground reality.
So sharing the gospel in India isn't just countercultural, it can be dangerous. But still, Praveen believed that the truth was worth any cost. Despite receiving threats and expressing concerns for his safety, Praveen remained steadfast in his mission, famously stating, "My life is in God's hands. I will serve him until my last breath." But just a few weeks before his death, he posted this chilling message. In English, it reads, "Brothers, be careful. Today someone issued a fatwa on a server saying to take my head for speaking the truth under that name," which, by the way, that name is a reference to the name of Jesus. And the fact that he posted this just a few weeks before he died makes the official explanation even harder for a lot of people to believe, especially once you consider how he died. On March 25, 2025, at the age of 45, Praveen was found deceased next to his motorcycle near a gas station in Rajahmundry. Police initially reported a road accident, but inconsistencies at the scene immediately fueled suspicion. An intact helmet, minimal bike damage, no skid marks, and the burn wound on his leg. Add to that the recent post from Praveen about death threats, combined with years of hostility from religious extremists, many began to suspect foul play. Prominent Christian leaders in India also questioned why he rode a motorcycle at night instead of taking his car. It just didn't make sense. And to make matters even more confusing, the reports didn't just say that he was involved in a motorcycle accident. They also said that he was intoxicated during the crash. In fact, the reports claimed that he was involved in 3 separate accidents during this trip and that he had purchased alcohol 3 times along the way. But that didn't sound like the Praveen people knew. He wasn't known to drink at all.
This looked like an attack on the Christian community because it's one of the leading persons who died under mysterious circumstances.
Because of this, protests erupted with countless people demanding an investigation. While the forensic report later suggested alcohol-related injuries, the Christian community, pointing to over 800 documented attacks on Christians in India in 2024 alone, believes his outspoken faith made him a target. I mean, just take a look at this statement from India's former director of the CBI, which is like their FBI. Right after the news broke that Praveen died, he issued a prayer to the Hindu gods to not forgive Praveen, not let him come back as a dog or a donkey, saying that it would be an insult to them, and instead requested that he come back as, quote, "a worm that lives in a pot or a cockroach that crawls in the toilet." Yeah. But despite all of this hate, his funeral still drew nearly 100,000 mourners, a massive crowd grieving and weeping and honoring the life of the man that they loved. He was loved by thousands, but hated by many. And the question everyone wants to know is, did his enemies finally silence him? Well, I recently got my hands on some pretty disturbing evidence that changes everything that we'll come back to you in just a second. But when stories like this hit the news, we're all left with the same question. What is the truth? It's moments like this where knowing how the stories are reported and who's reporting them can make all the difference. And that's why I'm excited to have Ground News as the sponsor of today's video. Ground News gathers articles from over 50,000 sources and shows you how they're being covered across the political spectrum, letting you see the full picture. For example, when it comes to J.D. Vance going to India to talk about tariffs, over 250 sources have covered it already, and out of those, 31 of them are left-leaning, while 28 are right-leaning, but they're covering the story from entirely different perspectives. The left emphasizes how Vance is going to meet with the Prime Minister as India is seeking reprieve from Trump's tariffs, while the right emphasizes Vance went there to discuss a trade pact. The bias couldn't be more clear. I also love the blind spot feed, which covers stories that are disproportionately covered by one end of the political spectrum. For example, only 11% of left-wing outlets have covered how Kremlin says that Russia is satisfied with the US blocking Ukraine's NATO membership, which is a massive blind spot. So Ground News has become a valuable tool for me, especially as a Christian seeking truth and integrity in media. And if you want to try Ground News today, go to groundnews.com/whatdoyoumeme and get 40% off of the Vantage plan. So thank you, Ground News, for sponsoring this part of today's video, as our sponsors really do a lot for us that make all of this possible. All right, now back to the video. So just a few days ago, some new footage surfaced, allegedly showing Praveen not too long before his death. As you can see here, he appears to be on his motorcycle driving before pulling up to a liquor store. So he walks into the liquor store, he looks at different bottles of liquor for a few minutes until he arrives at the counter to make a purchase. But here's where things start to look so suspicious. If you take a look at this shirt that he's wearing, you'll quickly notice it from other videos with him wearing it, as you can see in this video right here. So at first, it looks like the same shirt, right? Well, this is where it starts to get so strange, because if you take a closer look here, you'll see that the shirt that he was wearing at the counter shows an elastic band on the wrist. But if you look at the shirt he was wearing when he was found at the crash site, you'll see that his shirt doesn't appear to have an elastic band. So this made people doubt whether or not this was even the same man, which prompted people to call for his bank records to be released to verify the purchase. And surprisingly, the bank records were released and seemed to confirm him purchasing the liquor, until one little small detail seemed to raise more questions than answers. The screenshot right here is said to be proof that he made this purchase, and on it the bank ID shows LBL, but that's a non-existent bank ID. The actual ID is supposed to say IBL. So rather than the bank records putting an end to the suspicion, they only made it far worse. And on top of that, when his body was discovered, there weren't any external signs of blood, which made some people believe that he could have been beaten to death, and it was only made to look as if it was an accident. All right, get this. So as I was working on this video, one of my sources from India actually just wrote me and dropped a bombshell on me. Take a look at this. Hey John, there's something I learned about Praveen. I have a friend who is a close family friend of his. I didn't know he had that connection, but when I was asking around, he shared that Praveen had a secret tussle with alcohol. He said it wasn't a full-blown out addiction, but it came to the attention of his corporate colleagues and subsequently Praveen's close family. Apparently my dad's friend knew, but he didn't disclose it to my friend or his mother until after the accident. That makes sense since it's not ideal to spread about someone's secret struggles, especially when they're in ministry. He was devastated to hear it, and so was I. I remain skeptical still. I don't know why. I don't think my friend was lying. Maybe it was just denial at that stage. And that's when the police reports came. The report showed alcohol presence in his body. Reports then stated that he had purchased alcohol on previous journeys too, on March 12th and 13th. The prevailing theory in our Christian community was that all of this was set up, and everyone said so because no one who knew him, not even his ministry associates, could imagine him taking alcohol. The Christian community always denounced alcohol. This was uncharacteristic of someone like Praveen. I too held on to this until I heard from my friend. Maybe Praveen's wife's silence on the alcohol presence makes sense now. I don't know. He was a good man. He was generous, kind-hearted, and smart. But this is playing well into the hands of anti-Christian factions who want to tarnish his legacy and reduce him to nothing but what he did on March 24th. I figured you would benefit from this. Take care, John. And after reading this, honestly, I'm not really sure what to think. I trust my source and I know his character, so I believe that he's being honest and sincere. If true, this could also be supported by the fact that his wife said that she believes the investigation reports and doesn't seem to be afraid of preaching the gospel of Christ publicly still, as she did at his funeral.
As our God Jesus Christ teaches us to be in peace and harmony, we have to show through our lives also.
So it appears that the multiple CCTV footage, eyewitnesses, and autopsy reports all seem to confirm that he did in fact have a secret struggle with alcohol. But if he did, this doesn't mean that he wasn't targeted by the enemies of the gospel, but it might mean that the truth is more painful than the conspiracy. It could mean that a deeply faithful, beloved man of God was also carrying a quiet battle, and we just didn't know. But this isn't where the story ends, because our ultimate faith was never in a perfect pastor, but in a perfect savior. The beauty of the gospel is that it doesn't require perfect people. In fact, it assumes that we aren't. The Bible is filled with leaders that God used powerfully who also carried deep personal flaws. Moses had anger issues, David committed adultery, Peter denied Jesus, and Paul once persecuted Christians. Yet, God still used them, not because of their perfection, but because of his grace. If Praveen did quietly struggle with something like alcohol, that doesn't erase the truth that he preached, the people that he served, or the gospel he proclaimed. It just makes his need for the gospel all the more real. And it reminds us that even our most admired leaders are still people, fallible, broken, in need of grace, just like the rest of us. But the danger comes when we put our faith in them rather than the one that they point us to. Praveen's legacy isn't built on whether or not he stumbled. It's built on the gospel that he stood for, that Christ died for sinners, that he rose from the grave, and that through him, even the most broken among us can be made new. So, if your faith has ever been shaken by a leader's failure, if you ever thought, if they couldn't get it right, what hope do I have? Remember this, your hope was never supposed to be in them. It was always supposed to be in Jesus, the one who never sinned, never failed, and never will. And unlike every single leader who came before him, Jesus doesn't just point to the truth, he is the truth. Now, if you've ever wrestled with how God can use these broken and fallen leaders, or if you felt let down by them, you're not alone. Check out one of these videos that I made on the subject and hit the like button on your way out, as it really does help us in the algorithm, and I'll see you guys on the next one. All right? Thanks for watching.